you wonder if, looking backward many years from right now, historians will notice the remarkable coincidence in timing. Have you noticed? Here it is. At exactly the moment when the emergency powers they awarded to themselves to fight COVID started to wane, our leaders began pushing for conflict with Russia. And then, on the basis of that conflict, they assumed historic war powers. Without even pausing, the Biden administration declared total economic war on a sovereign country. No American had been killed. The United States had not been invaded or attacked. And yet, with no meaningful public debate or congressional authorization, the Biden administration destroyed that country's currency, then removed it from the international banking system that impoverished its population. Then the administration began seizing the property of people affiliated with that country without a trial or due process of any kind, without even bothering to explain exactly what crime they had committed. No American government had ever done anything like that before. If there was one thing the U.S. government long stood for, it was the rule of law. The integrity of the system was always the most important thing, but not anymore. That turned out to be an era, and that era is gone. Because the target is Russia, very few Americans have noticed any of this. They support it. Virtually no one has paused to ask him or herself where this might be going. How long until our leaders do something similar to their domestic enemies here in the United States? How long before they accuse you of collusion or disloyalty or some other hard-to-define crime, declare you an enemy of the state, and then confiscate your bank account? Something very much like that just happened in Canada. We don't imagine it could happen here. Mostly we just don't think about it. What we think about is Ukraine. And that's the other thing that's changed. The tech monopolies now exert a level of control over American public opinion that has no precedent in all of history. Eliminating Section 230 or whatever piddling reform Congress is talking about at the moment, it all seems like a joke at this point. It's too late. The medieval church had less command over a society's emotions than Facebook and Google and Twitter now do. For the past 2 years, you have watched these companies, above all, define who you as an American must hate. Depending upon their directive of the day, our citizens dutifully change their social media avatars, from BLM signs to mask up slogans to now Ukrainian flags. Each is a crisis, and each new crisis is carefully stage managed from Silicon Valley at the direction of the White House. How does the human brain compete with this? How does it understand it? Well, it doesn't. Clarity and perspective become impossible. In the hysteria, even the recent past just evaporates. The morning that Russia invaded Ukraine, you may have been talking about a lot of different things, COVID or crime or the southern border. Not anymore. Much to the relief of the White House, all of those topics have been forgotten, maybe forever. No population has ever been more skillfully manipulated than our population is being manipulated right now. But even with the tech monopolies on the case full time, there are limits. Some topics cannot be hidden, and inflation is one of them. Google can delete all the search results it wants, but you still know what hamburger and gasoline cost because you go to the store. You know exactly how bad inflation is, and it's bad. In fact, inflation is so high right now that even affluent people are worried about it, and not worried in some abstract sense like about the long-term health of the country, though that too. People who make $250,000 a year are worried they will not be able to continue living as they do now. You may or may not feel sorry for them, but let's put it in perspective. Imagine if you made $50,000 a year or $30,000 a year, as many Americans do. You would be terrified in the face of this inflation, and maybe you are. So what's causing it? What is the root of the inflation? If you want to know the answer to that question, the fastest way to get it is to check to see what politicians are denying. Whatever they claim is not the cause of inflation almost certainly is the cause of inflation. And with that in mind, here's Joe Biden telling you that government spending has nothing to do with it.
We're on track right now. I'm on track to be the first president in history to lower the deficit by over $1 trillion in 1 year. So I'm sick of this stuff. We have to talk about it because the American people think the reason for inflation is government spending more money. Simply not true.
Now you can say, well, that's just Joe Biden. Joe Biden's never had a real job. Even before he became senile, he was reputed to be a dim bulb, and he was. But don't kid yourself. In the clip you just saw, Joe Biden knows perfectly well he's lying. It's simply not true, he squeaks. Really, Joe Biden? How is it simply not true? Notice he doesn't tell you how it's simply not true because, in fact, it is emphatically, unequivocally true. Inflation is a function of money supply. The more money you have in circulation, the less that money is worth. Even Joe Biden understands that. The month after Biden became president, the supply of U.S. dollars in circulation increased more than it ever had before in a single month. And then it kept going higher, month after month after month, as the administration and the Congress kept the money taps open. And that's why we have historic inflation now, because they printed too much money. It's not complicated. But it's not the whole story. It did not start with Joe Biden, to be fair. In the months after the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve assumed emergency powers to respond to the financial collapse. Now, if you're noticing a theme here, the people in charge giving themselves emergency powers in the face of a crisis they created, we may be onto something. But in any case, after 2008, the Fed dropped interest rates to near zero and then began printing money. This was supposed to save our economy. And maybe it would have saved the economy if it had ended at some point. But it did not end. It went on to the present day. That's nearly 14 years. And in the process, what was designed to save our economy destroyed our economy. Several times over the years, wiser heads at the Fed talked about dropping the emergency measures and reintroducing reality into the American economy, reintroducing market forces. Remember those? But each time they contemplated this, Wall Street revolted in very public ways. Wage growth in the productive economy had stalled, but the market for private jets was booming. So asset inflation became the basis of wealth for many people at the top end. Buy things, then sell them for more. Make nothing. Now, no society can continue like that for very long because it's not inherently productive. It's a shell game. But ours did for more than 14 years. And in the process, this country became more lopsided economically than it's ever been. Fewer people owning more of everything. The Fed was fully aware of this. They're not stupid. They knew they were causing these trends, and that most of these trends were dangerous and bad for America. But the truth is, nobody could stop it. Fed governors understood that markets would tank if they tried to pull back. So it was really a classic Ponzi. It was criminal mismanagement of our economy, but nobody could stop doing it for fear the whole thing would collapse. And now we're at the end stage. The Fed is out of tricks. The problem with inflation, and some economists want limited inflation at certain periods. Some people in Davos have been calling for it for years. But the problem with inflation levels like this is there is no simple way to pull them back. The Fed cannot painlessly massage its way out of $7 a gallon gas prices. So when you reach a state as we are now, you really have only two options. You can pretend it's not happening, or you can blame someone else for it. And the White House is trying both. Here's Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen trying the first.
We really protected most Americans from severe financial crisis consequences of the pandemic so that they're by and large in good financial shape, poised to spend enough to continue propelling solid growth in the U.S. economy. And we're seeing that in the labor market.
Now you wonder, as you stare into a camera and say something like that, if you can convince yourself there's a single human being who believes you. Things are great. You should be grateful for our wise stewardship of your economy. Keep in mind the woman you just heard, Janet Yellen, was the chair of the Federal Reserve for 4 years. So not to be technical about it, but if anyone is culpable for the disaster we're living through now, it would be Janet Yellen. So she knows she's lying. And she's not even lying very effectively because, once again, Americans understand the state of the economy because they live within it. They pay for things. So if you're going to lie about its cause, you're going to have to do better than just pretending it's not going on. You're going to have to blame somebody else. And so the White House enlisted Joe Biden's publicist to make a video about Vladimir Putin. Watch this.
You may have noticed this week that your gas prices have gone up. I want to talk to you a little bit about why. A lot of it has to do with Vladimir Putin, and there's opportunities to produce more from here. But part of this is on the oil companies. Right now, there are 9,000 approved unused permits that oil and gas companies could tap into now to ramp up production. That's why the president has been so focused on investing in clean energy technologies, so that we can rely on that and not President Putin to set the price of gas.
I want to talk to you a little bit about
now on Vladimir Putin. Here's the statement that President Biden put out about inflation. He said, today's inflation report is a reminder that America's budgets are being stretched by price increases and families are starting to feel the impacts of, Ainsley, Putin's price hike. That is the talking point that we're hearing. It's all Vladimir Putin, none of the policies we've
Do they just think we're dumb? This is what happens when you're in an administration. You look at whatever the biggest conflict is, whatever the biggest news story is. It happens to be what's happening in Russia right now. They think that, oh, that's great. We're going to take advantage of this. We're going to blame everything on that situation to divert, to redirect, so that we're not blamed for this. Even though we are not dumb, and we have felt this in our pocketbooks, in our bank accounts, Democrats, Republicans, independents, everyone across the country have felt the inflation, have felt food prices going up, our electric bills going up. To fill your gas tank, someone told me in California it was $100 for her mom to fill up her gas tank. She lives in LA. I mean, that's crazy. We're not stupid. This has been going on for more than a year now. We saw it happening as soon as Donald Trump left and as soon as Joe Biden takes office. And people want it fixed. And they're going to have a problem in November at midterms if they don't solve this problem. They can blame it on everything under the sun. But we know that it is their fault. And if they don't fix it, they're going to lose the elections in November.
Steve Radner worked for President Obama and would not hear of it or have it. Like Larry Summers has been speaking out when economics has just been misconstrued and mismessaged. He says, well, no, these are February numbers and include only a small Russia effect. This is Biden's inflation, and he needs to own it. And they go back to the 1.9 rescue package, saying that was totally unnecessary. Trump gave you $800 billion, which was unnecessary. We sent $6 trillion coming out of the pandemic. We just spent $1.4 last night on the omnibus bill. You spend all this money if the dollars just inflate, but it's not going to stop that messaging from coming out.
You're exactly right. I mean, they have to think people are dumb, because every single chart on inflation and on gas prices looks like that since he took over. And yet they're trying to say, just pay attention to this really little part at the end. And that's what Steve Radner put it out, an Obama official. 4 days of that consumer price index report are when the war was actually going on.
The more we pay at the pump, the more they're going to pay in November.